The rope bit into Celestine's neck as the wooden platform groaned beneath her feet. Below, the entire population of Millhaven had gathered in the town square, their faces twisted with righteous fury and bloodlust. The autumn wind whipped through her auburn hair as she searched the crowd desperately for one face, the only face that mattered.
Out.
Sheriff Bramwell's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Celestine's lips curved into a defiant smile despite the noose's cruel embrace. "I regret nothing," she declared, her voice carrying across the silent square. "Love is not a sin, no matter what your small minds believe." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll, whether marking the hour or her impending death. She couldn't tell. The executioner's hand moved toward the lever that would release the trapdoor beneath her feet. But then she saw him. Kellen emerged from the crowd like a ghost materializing from mist. His dark hair caught the morning light, and those silver eyes that had haunted her dreams blazed with an otherworldly fire. The townspeople parted before him without conscious thought, as if compelled by some invisible force. "Stop," he commanded, and his voice seemed to echo from the very stones beneath their feet. Sheriff Bramwell laughed harshly. "The devil's spawn shows himself at last. You're next, boy. Right after we finish with your whore?" The words had barely left his lips when Kellen raised his hand. Lightning cracked across the cloudless sky, and every person in the square suddenly found themselves unable to move, frozen like statues in a child's game. "She is not my whore," Kellen said softly, ascending the platform steps with fluid grace. "She is my heart, my soul, my everything." His fingers worked at the noose with infinite tenderness, and Celestine felt the rough hemp fall away from her bruised throat. When his hands cupped her face, she saw tears streaming down his cheeks, tears that glowed like liquid starlight. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her forehead. "I should have protected you better. I should have. You're here now," she breathed, her voice hoarse but steady. "That's all that matters." Around them, the frozen crowd watched in helpless terror as Kellen's skin began to emit a soft, pearl-like luminescence. The very air seemed to shimmer and bend around his form, and Celestine realized with wonder that she was finally seeing him as he truly was, not the mortal guise he wore to walk among men, but something far more ancient and powerful.
They called
"You a witch," he said, his thumb tracing the rope burns on her neck. "They don't understand that you're something far more precious. You're the one pure soul in this God-forsaken place who saw past what I appeared to be and loved what I truly am." The sheriff's eyes bulged with effort as he strained against Kellen's power, veins standing out like cords in his neck. But he remained frozen, watching helplessly as the being he'd tried to execute revealed its true nature. "Show them," Celestine whispered, her hand covering his. "Show them what real power looks like." Kellen's luminescence intensified until it hurt to look directly at him, yet Celestine found she could stare into that blazing light without pain. Around them, the frozen townspeople began to weep tears of terror. Yes, but also of something deeper, recognition, the primal understanding, that they stood in the presence of something that existed beyond their comprehension. "I am not what you think I am," Kellen's voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to come from the earth itself. "I am not demon or devil. I am what you mortals once called angel, though that word has been twisted by centuries of fear and misunderstanding.
Is it?
Wings unfurled, not the feathered appendages of children's picture books, but constructs of pure energy that shifted between silver and gold, casting dancing shadows across the wooden platform. Each wing spanned 20 feet, and when they moved, they stirred winds that carried the scent of rain and wildflowers. Sheriff Bromwell's face had gone purple with the effort of trying to speak, to move, to do anything against the supernatural force holding him captive. Saliva dripped from his frozen lips as he stared in horror at the creature he'd dismissed as merely another drifter. "You tried to hang an innocent woman," Kellen continued, his attention now focused on the sheriff. "A woman whose only crime was showing kindness to a stranger, offering food to the hungry, shelter to the lost." Celestine remembered that first night 3 months ago, when she'd found him collapsed near the old mill wheel. his clothes torn and bloodied, his silver eyes clouded with pain. Any sensible woman would have run. Instead, she'd helped him to her cabin, tended his wounds, fed him soup by candlelight while rain drummed against the windows. "I knew what you were the moment I saw you," she said softly, her fingers intertwining. With his glowing ones, not the specifics, but I knew you weren't entirely human. The way birds fell silent when you passed. How flowers bloomed out of season where you walked. The light that seemed to follow you, even on the darkest nights. He turned those impossible silver eyes toward her, and she saw galaxies swirling in. Their depths, you weren't afraid. "I was terrified," she admitted with a laugh that was half sob, but not of you. "I was afraid of how completely I'd fallen in love with you after just one night. How willing I was to give up everything, my reputation, my place in this community, my very life, for a few stolen moments in your arms." The confession hung between them like a bridge built of starlight and shadow. Below, the crowd remained, frozen, unwilling witnesses to a love story that defied every law they understood. "They called it witchcraft when you healed Mrs. Cordelia's consumption," Kellen said, his thumb still tracing the rope marks on her throat. Where he touched, the bruises began to fade. "When you made the Hendersons' dying crops flourish with a touch. When you brought the Ashworth baby back from the brink of death." "It wasn't my power," Celestine said, wonder filling her voice as understanding dawned. "It was yours. It's working through me, through our connection." He nodded, and his smile was radiant enough to shame the sun. "Love is the greatest magic of all. It transforms everything it touches. Through you, I remembered what it meant to heal instead of merely exist. Through our bond, my power became something beautiful instead of just ... necessary." The townspeople's frozen tears had turned to steam in the heat of his radiance. Some faces showed dawning comprehension, while others remained locked in terror. Sheriff Bramwell looked as though he might burst a blood vessel in his effort to break free and run, but Celestine only had eyes for Kellen. For the being who had loved her enough to reveal his true nature before an entire town that would surely hunt them both. "Release them," Celestine said quietly, her hand still resting over his heart, where she could feel the cosmic rhythm of his true nature. "Let them choose their response freely." Kellen's eyes searched hers, finding only calm certainty. "They will run, or try to kill us both. Perhaps some will finally understand that real love is worth any risk." Her smile was gentle but unwavering. "I trust you to protect us either way." With a gesture that seemed to cost him effort, Kellen released his hold on the crowd. The effect was immediate and chaotic. F. The townspeople scattered like startled deer, their screams echoing off the surrounding buildings as they fled for their homes and barricaded doors. Others dropped to their knees in spontaneous prayer, unsure whether they witnessed miracle or apocalypse. But Sheriff Bramwell, freed from his supernatural bonds, lunged for the gun at his hip with murder blazing in his eyes. He never reached it. Faster than human sight could follow. Kellen moved, not to strike or harm, but to simply touch the sheriff's forehead with 2 fingers. Bramwell froze again, but this time his expression shifted from rage to wonder as his eyes rolled back, revealing only white. "I gift you with sight," Kellen said solemnly. "True sight." When Bramwell's eyes focused again, they held the glassy shock of a man who had seen beyond the veil of ordinary reality. His gun hand trembled, then fell to his side as he stared at Celestine with something approaching reverence. "Oh my God," he whispered. "I can see the light around her. She's connected to you by threads of pure golden light. And you..." His gaze shifted to Kellen, and he stumbled backward. "You're not fallen at all. You're one of the protectors. The guardians." "What?" "Do you see, Sheriff?" Dr. Blackthorne called from the crowd. Unlike the others, the old physician had neither fled nor knelt, but stood watching with the analytical detachment that had made him both the best healer and the most skeptical mind in Millhaven. Bramwell's voice shook as he answered. "Wings. Great silver wings that stretch from earth to sky." His face, when you really see it, it's like looking at the face of creation itself. He turned back to Celestine, his expression now filled with shame. Her she glows with reflected, light. She's not corrupted or damned. She's been ... blessed. Murmur ran through those who had remained. Some crossed themselves. Code bepped openly. A few began to approach the platform with tentative steps, wonder overcoming fear. The miracles. Old Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice cracked with age and awe. The healings, the way crops grew where she walked. It was divine intervention, wasn't it? Kellen's wings folded back into invisibility, though his skin retained its subtle luminescence. Divine is your word, not mine. I am what I am, a being. Tasked with protecting this realm from forces that would corrupt or destroy it, came to Millhaven because darkness was gathering here. Corruption that fed on hatred, ignorance, and fear. His silver gaze swept across the remaining crowd with infinite sadness. But I found something I never expected. A soul so pure, so filled with love and compassion, that merely being near her began to heal wounds I'd carried for centuries. Through. Loving her, I remembered what it meant to hope. Celestine felt tears streaming down her cheeks as his words washed over her. She'd known he was special, otherworldly, but she'd never imagined the depth of his loneliness or the significance of their connection. The corruption, she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her, was trying to turn the town against anyone who showed compassion, making people suspicious of kindness, twisting love into something shameful. He nodded gravely. It feeds on division, hatred. The very emotions that drove this crowd to demand your execution. His attention returned to Sheriff Bramwell. You felt it, didn't you? The whispers in your mind telling you that anyone different was dangerous. That love between a stranger and one of your own was somehow evil. Bramwell's face crumpled as the full weight of his actions hit him. The voice. It started weeks ago, telling me she was dangerous. That you were corrupting our women, our town. Every night it got stronger, until all I could think about was... He gestured helplessly at the hanging platform. Murder, Kellen finished quietly. The corruption's ultimate goal. To turn neighbor against neighbor until communities tear themselves apart from within. Dr. Blackthorne stepped forward, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. I felt it too, he admitted. The whispers. The growing certainty that something was wrong in Millhaven. But my scientific training taught me to question such impulses. His keen eyes studied Kellen with fascination, rather than fear. You're not the first of your kind I've encountered, though the others were. Less benevolent in their intentions. A chill ran through the crowd at his words. Celestine felt Kellen tense beside her, his protective instincts flaring. There are others here? Kellen asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer.
One other.
He arrived shortly after you did, though he concealed his nature far more effectively. Blackthorne's expression darkened. He's been working through certain members of our community, stoking the fears and prejudices that led to today's unfortunate events. As if summoned by their conversation, a figure emerged from the crowd. Tall and distinguished, with silver hair and cold blue eyes, he moved with predatory grace that made Celestine's skin crawl. She'd seen him before Cornelius Aldrich. The wealthy merchant who'd arrived from back east, claiming to want to invest in Millhaven's future. How touching, Aldrich said, his cultured voice carrying easily across the square. The Guardian reveals himself to save his pet mortal. Though I must say your timing is impeccable. I was beginning to worry you'd let them kill her before I had the chance to complete my work here. The temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees as Kellen stepped protectively in front of Celestine. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of cosmic authority. Malthus. I should have known the corruption here bore your signature. Aldrich Malthus smiled, and for a moment his human facade slipped, revealing something ancient and hungry underneath. Did you really think you could hide among these cattle indefinitely? Your light calls to me like a beacon, dear brother, as does hers. His gaze fixed on Celestine with predatory interest, and she felt violated just by being looked at. Whatever this creature was, it was the antithesis of everything Kellen represented. She's magnificent, isn't she? Malthus continued conversationally. Such purity, such capacity for love. Do you know how exquisite it will be when I corrupt her? When I twist that beautiful soul until she becomes everything she currently despises? Kellen's radiance flared so brightly that several townspeople cried out and shielded their eyes. "You will not touch her." "But I already have." Malphus gestured lazily toward the crowd. Every whisper of hatred, every moment of suspicion directed at her these past weeks, that was my influence working through these simple minds. And the best part? She blamed herself. Wondered what she'd done wrong to make her neighbors turn against her. The words hit Celestine like physical blows. She remembered the sleepless nights, the growing isolation, the way even her oldest friends had begun to avoid her after word of her relationship with Kellen spread through town. The corruption wasn't just targeting the town, she realized aloud. It was targeting me specifically. Of course it was, my dear. Malphus purred. You're the key to everything. Your pure soul, connected to his power through love, corrupt you, and I corrupt him by extension. Transform Millhaven's guardian into its destroyer. The remaining townspeople had begun to back away from both supernatural beings, sensing the tension crackling between them, like lightning before a storm. Sheriff Bramwell still stood frozen with revelation, while Dr. Blackthorne watched with the fascination of a man witnessing history unfold. But Celestine felt only anger. Pure, righteous fury at the creature that had poisoned her community, turned friends into enemies, and nearly succeeded in destroying the love that had become the center of her world. You failed, she said, stepping out from behind Kellen's protective form. Whatever you were trying to accomplish, you failed. Their hatred didn't corrupt me, it only made me love him more. Malphus laughed, a sound like glass breaking in a cathedral. Failed, oh my sweet, naive little mortal. Corruption was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to drive you to this moment standing here, defiant and pure, your soul blazing like a small sun with righteous fury. He raised his hand, and shadows began to pour from his fingertips like liquid darkness. Do you know what happens when perfect purity meets perfect corruption? When light and shadow collide at their most intense? Don't listen to him, Kellen warned, but Celestine could see the concern in his silver eyes. Whatever Malphus was planning was something her guardian hadn't anticipated. The shadows crept across the wooden platform like living things, reaching toward Celestine with hungry tendrils. Where they touched, the wood began to rot and blacken. The remaining townspeople screamed and fled as the corruption spread outward in concentric circles. Transformation, Malphus continued, his human facade melting away completely now. Beneath lay something that hurt to look at directly, not because it was hideous, but because it was beautiful in a way that violated every natural law. When forces of equal and opposite power meet, they don't cancel each other out. They become something entirely new. Celestine felt the shadows brush against her skin and gasped as cold fire raced through her veins. Expected, she felt. ... Expansion. As if her consciousness was suddenly too large for her mortal form. Celestine. Kellen reached for her, but his hand passed through her as if she'd become incorporeal. I can see it all, she whispered in wonder, her voice echoing strangely in the corrupted air. Every thread of connection between every living thing, the way love flows like rivers of light between souls. It's the places where fear and hatred have created knots and tangles in the pattern. Malphus's triumphant expression faltered as he realized his corruption wasn't working as intended. Instead of twisting her purity into darkness, it was amplifying her natural ability to see and understand the connections between all things. No, he snarled, pouring more shadow into the working. You will fall. You will become like me. I will not be cheated of this victory. But with each wave of corruption he sent at her, Celestine only became more radiant. The darkness wasn't destroying. Her light whisk was giving her light something to push against, something to define itself in opposition to. She was becoming a beacon that could be seen from realms away. She's not falling, Dr. Blackthorne observed with scientific fascination, apparently immune to the supernatural terror paralyzing everyone else. She's ascending, evolving. The corruption is acting as a catalyst for transformation rather than destruction. Kellen's eyes widened with understanding. She's becoming like me, like us. The love between us, strengthened by adversity, is burning away her mortality. Around Celestine, reality began to bend and shift. She could see the true forms of both supernatural beings. Now Kellen's radiant magnificence and Malphus's terrible, beauty. But more than that, she could see the network of connections that bound all living things together. And she could sense where that network was damaged or corrupted. "I can fix this," she said, her voice now harmonizing with itself in impossible ways. "I can heal the damage you've done to this town, to these people." She reached out with senses she'd never possessed before, touching the minds that had been poisoned by Malthus's influence. Sheriff Bramwell gasped as hatred and suspicion were burned out of his thoughts, leaving only confusion and growing shame. Mrs. Patterson wept as her natural compassion was restored. One by one, the townspeople who had fled began to return, drawn by an inexplicable sense that something wonderful was happening. "This is not possible," Malthus raged, his shadows now recoiling from Celestine's growing radiance. "Mortals cannot ascend, cannot become. The laws change," Celestine said simply, "when love is strong enough to rewrite them." She turned to face him fully, and Malthus stumbled backward as if struck.
Ow.
In her eyes, he saw not hatred or fear, but perfect understanding and pity. "I see what you are," she said gently. "What you were before the fall, before the corruption took hold in your own heart. You were beautiful once. You were loved." "Stop," he whispered, his form beginning to flicker between human and something else entirely. "You don't have to be this way forever. Love can heal even the deepest corruption if you're willing to let it." Alves recoiled as if her words were weapons, his beautiful, terrible form wavering like heat shimmer. "You understand nothing. Corruption incarnate. I am the shadow that gives meaning to your precious light. Without me, without beings like me, your love would be meaningless, untested, untried, worthless." But even as he spoke, cracks appeared in his darkness. Literally lines of silver light began to spider through his shadowy essence like breaks in black ice, revealing something almost forgotten beneath. "You're afraid," Celestine said with dawning comprehension. "You're terrified that if you stop being the enemy, if you stop providing opposition and conflict, you'll become irrelevant, forgotten." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow, and he staggered backward. Around them, the corrupted platform began to repair itself as her radiance pushed back against his decay. Wood regained its natural color, metal stopped rusting, the very air cleared of its oppressive weight. "I have seen the tapestry," she continued, her newly awakened senses showing her visions that spanned eons. "The great pattern that connects all things across all realms. Even corruption serves a purpose, creates the resistance that allows souls to grow stronger. But you've forgotten that purpose. You corrupt not to strengthen, but to destroy, not to test, but to consume." Kellen moved to stand beside her, his own radiance harmonizing with hers, until they blazed like a binary star system. "She offers you redemption, brother. A chance to remember what you were before the hunger took you." "I was weak," Malthus snarled, but his voice cracked with something that might have been longing. "I loved and I lost, and I couldn't bear the pain. So I chose to become something that could never be hurt again." The silver cracks in his darkness widened, and through them glimpsed something heartbreaking, the echo of what he'd been before his fall. Beautiful beyond description, radiant with love and hope, a being of such pure joy that the memory of it brought tears to Celestine's eyes. "Love always involves the risk of loss," she said softly. "But the alternative is this endless hunger that can never be satisfied. Corruption that turns everything beautiful into ash. Is that really better than risking your heart again?" For a moment, just a moment, Malthus wavered. The shadows around him thinned, and his true form began to emerge. Mert. The terrible beauty of corruption, but the memory of light. The townspeople who had gathered gasped in recognition. For this was the face carved in the stained glass windows of their church, the countenance of hope itself. I had forgotten," he whispered, staring at his own hands as light began to flicker beneath his skin. What it felt like to hope instead of hunger, to create instead of corrupt, to love, ... But then Sheriff Bramwell, still shaken by his own revelations, made a crucial error. Drawing his gun with trembling hands, he pointed it at Malthus and shouted, "Devil, we won't let you deceive us with false redemption." The gunshot cracked across the square like thunder, And though the bullet passed harmlessly through Malfease's incorporeal form, the attack itself was enough. Fear and hatred, directed at him once again, gave his corruption fresh fuel. The moment of potential redemption shattered like spun glass, you see? Malphus laughed bitterly as shadows poured back into him, snuffing out the emerging light. Is what I am to them. To all of them. The enemy. The fear in the dark. They need me to be evil so they can feel righteous in their hatred. His form solidified back into terrible beauty as he spread wings of living shadow. You offer me redemption, but they offer me purpose. Guess which gift I choose? It doesn't have to be this way, Celestine pleaded. But she could feel him withdrawing, pulling back from the brink of transformation. Perhaps not, he agreed sadly, but it is what I choose. What I have always chosen, the pain of isolation is familiar, now preferable to the agony of hope followed by inevitable loss. He began to fade, becoming translucent around the edges. I will not corrupt your town further, little light. Your victory is complete. But know this, there will always be others like me. Shadows that test the strength of your illumination. Corruption that challenges the purity of your love. Be ready, Kellen said firmly, his wing curving protectively around Celestine. Malphus smiled then, and for just a moment it was genuinely fond rather than mocking. Yes, I believe you will. Guard her well, Guardian. She has become something unprecedented, a mortal who chose ascension through love rather than fear. The realms will take notice. With those words, he dissolved completely, leaving only the memory of shadows and the faint scent of roses and ash. The square fell silent, except for the sound of weeping, some from relief, some from shame, some from the overwhelming beauty of what they had witnessed in the aftermath of Malphus's departure. Millhaven seemed to exhale collectively, as if the town itself had been holding its breath. The corruption that had poisoned hearts and minds for weeks dissipated like morning mist, leaving behind clarity and, in many cases, profound regret. Sheriff Bramwell was the first to approach the platform, his gun discarded in the dirt behind. His face bore the weight of a man who had seen his own soul reflected in an unforgiving mirror and found it wanting. Miss Celestine, he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. There are no words for what I nearly did, what I was driven to do. He fell to his knees before the platform, no longer seeing a suspected witch, but a woman who had transcended mortality through the purity of her love. I beg your forgiveness, though I know I don't deserve it. One by one, the other townspeople came forward. Mrs. Patterson, weeping openly as she remembered the meals Celestine had brought when she was ill. The Hendersons, clutching each other as they recalled how their dying crops had flourished under her gentle touch. Even those who had fled in terror returned, drawn by an inexplicable sense that something sacred was occurring in their humble town square. There's nothing to forgive, Celestine said, her voice still carrying those impossible harmonics that spoke of transformation. The corruption wasn't truly you. It was fear given form, hatred made manifest. But that's gone now. She stepped down from the platform with fluid grace, and where her bare feet touched the earth, wildflowers bloomed in her footprints. The crowd gasped in wonder. But there was no fear in their faces now, only awe and recognition of something holy. Dr. Blackthorne approached with scientific curiosity barely contained behind professional composure. What happens now? He asked. You're no longer entirely human, are you? Neither of you can simply return to the life you had before. Kellen and Celestine exchanged a look that contained volumes of unspoken communication. In her eyes, he saw acceptance of whatever path lay ahead. In his, she saw the promise that they would walk it together. The realms have taken notice, Kellen confirmed, echoing Malphus's warning. Our Yuna guardian, and an ascended mortal, bound by love rather than duty, is unprecedented. There will be others who seek to test us, corrupt us, or simply understand what we've become, but not here, Celestine added firmly. Millhaven has suffered enough. We won't bring any more supernatural conflicts to your doorstep. You're leaving? Patterson asked, her voice small with loss. We must, Celestine said gently, but not immediately. There's healing to be done first, not just from today's events, but from weeks of supernatural influence. The corruption left scars on this community that need tending. Over the following days, Celestine and Kellen worked together to repair the damage Malphas had inflicted, with her new abilities allowing her to see the connections between all living things. She could identify exactly where the corruption had taken root. With his guardian powers, Kellen could burn it away without causing further harm. They healed more than just supernatural wounds. Old grudges that had been amplified by demonic influence dissolved under Celestine's gentle touch. Marriages strained by unnatural suspicion found new strength. Children who had learned to fear the different and unusual rediscovered wonder and acceptance. Sheriff Bramwell proved to be their most stalwart ally, his guilt transforming into fierce protectiveness. "I'll make sure no one speaks ill of what happened here," he promised. "This town has been blessed, not cursed. Any fool who can't see that doesn't deserve to live among decent folk." On their final morning in Millhaven, Celestine stood in the doorway of her cottage, now their cottage, watching Kellen tend the garden that had become a minor miracle. Every plant grew with supernatural vitality, and the vegetables and herbs would provide healing remedies for the town long after their departure. "Any regrets?" he asked, sensing her presence without turning around. "Only that it took a near hanging. For me to discover what I was capable of becoming," she replied with a laugh that held notes of silver bells and wind chimes. "Though I suppose if it had been easy, the transformation wouldn't have been as complete." He stood and turned to face her, dirt smudged on his hands and joy radiating from every line of his body. Even in his human guise, he couldn't entirely hide his otherworldly nature anymore. Not from her eyes, which now saw truth in all its forms. "Where shall we go?" she asked, slipping her arms around his waist and reveling in the way their combined energies created patterns of light that danced across their skin. "Wherever we're needed," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead that tasted of starlight and eternity. "There are places where corruption has taken root, communities that need healing, souls that have forgotten how to love. We'll find them together, always together, for all eternity, in this realm and any other that will have us." As they prepared to leave Millhaven, the entire town gathered to see them off. There were tears, but also profound gratitude and a kind of peace that comes from witnessing a miracle and understanding its true meaning. "Will we see you again?" little Tommy Henderson asked, his eyes wide with the innocence only children possess. "Perhaps," Celestine said, kneeling to his level. "But even if you don't, remember what you learned here. Love is stronger than fear. Acceptance is more powerful than hatred, and sometimes the things that seem most dangerous are actually the most beautiful." They walked away from Millhaven hand in hand as the sun set behind them, their combined radiance creating a path of light that stretched to the horizon and beyond. Behind them, the town settled into an evening of unprecedented peace and harmony. Before them lay an infinite road and countless opportunities to prove that love, true love, could indeed conquer all. And somewhere in the space between realms, other beings took notice of what they had accomplished and began to whisper of changes coming to the cosmic order. Changes wrought not through power or conquest, but through the simple, radical act of two souls choosing to love each other against all odds and beyond all limitations. The age of love-born miracles had begun.